Of year update at the end of 2020, I mentioned that one thing I would like to do more of in 2021 is experiment with long exposure photography, particularly with an ND filter. And so at some point early in the year, or maybe it was late in December, I think it might have been right at the end of last year, I went and bought a 10-stop ND filter for my 50mm lens. And that means it lets in way, way less light. It's basically like a welding helmet for your lens because it lets in almost no light at all. And it allows you to take long exposures during broad daylight, which is what you see here. This is a picture of Theta Pond on campus, and you've seen me take, or you've seen a ton of my pictures of Theta Pond on campus, but this is unlike any other because this is a very long exposure. This is a 15-second exposure in broad daylight. I think it was 2 in the afternoon when I took this photo. And the reason I was able to get such a long exposure is because I had this ND filter on my lens. Now I was using I was shooting at ISO 100 f/16, and normally that would get you like 1/30th of a second exposure in broad daylight. But with that, or 1/15th of a second, but with that ND filter screwed on the lens, it was all the way to 15 seconds. And that means you can get these really smooth photos. So this is a fountain, obviously, and it's smooth. I mean, it's like glass, and the surface of the water is just smooth as all get out. There were geese flying around on this photo, and if you look carefully, you can kind of see artifacts on the left-hand side of where they were swimming in the water. But you really lose a lot of those, I don't want to say imperfections, but those moving elements of a photo. They all basically disappear, and you're left with the static elements. And if there are moving elements like this fountain, they sort of stretch out over time. And so instead of capturing individual drops of water, you catch this smooth stream of water. Now, this is just my first photo I'm sharing with this new ND filter. I hope to take a lot more because I don't think this one's that great. I think the colors aren't quite what I would like. I didn't actually spend a lot of time editing this photo. Maybe I should have. But this was a really fun way to experiment with that new ND filter. And it was really cool to try. It's tricky as well because you can't see out of that lens. You have to adjust your exposure and your focus before you put that ND filter on, and then recalculate your exposure accordingly. So it's really tricky to do this, but it was a lot of fun to play around with this. And my kids were actually with me, and I didn't want to keep them waiting all day. So I would sit down and spend like a couple minutes taking one single photo, and then I would move and take another photo. And meanwhile, they're running around just in the background. I didn't want to tell them that these photos were more important to me than my kids. But I do hope to return to various locations like Theta Pond in the coming months and take more of these photos because it sure is a lot of fun to do.